Ako se sudi po broju dokumentarnih filmova snimljenih na tu temu, čini se da Nepresušnu inspiraciju predstavlja jedno od najkobnijih razdoblja 20. stoljeća, vrijeme Trećeg Reicha. Možda zato jer je od samog početka, crpeći snagu iz zamišljenih mističnih svjetova, nacistička Njemačka krenula i u potragu za okultnim znanjima. Kroz neopoganske rituale režim je crpio moć i održavao se na vlasti, ali povijest sklonosti nadnaravnom u Njemačkoj seže i puno dublje u prošlost. Kurlander, cijenjeni američki povjesničar, pozabavio se poviješću nadnaravnog u nacističkoj Njemačkoj, istražujući okultne ideje, ezoteričnu znanost i poganske religije koje su u velikoj mjeri obilježile njemačko društvo tijekom 30. i 40. godina 20. stoljeća. A razgovor smo dogovorili ovdje, na Rubu Znanosti. Dobro večer. Kurlander, autor je knjige Hitlerova čudovišta, povijest nadnaravnog u Trećem Reichu, i to je tema o kojoj ćemo večeras razgovarati. Dobro večer.
Dobro večer.
Pa evo za početak, vratimo se malo u prošlost, s obzirom da koliko god da je poznata činjenica da je Treći Reich obilovao tako okultnim stremljenjima, nadnaravnim nekakvim idejama i slično. To je u stvari jedna tendencija koja nije nastala sa Trećim Reichom, nego je na neki način predstavljalo nasljeđe 19. i 20. stoljeća. Pa kakav je to bio okultni milje koji se u Njemačkoj razvio krajem 19. i početkom 20. stoljeća i zbog čega je bio tako utjecajan na politiku?
The occult and kind of alternative religion experienced a kind of renaissance throughout the West and Europe in the late 19th century because a lot of Europeans weren't quite comfortable with traditional religion anymore, especially Protestants, but some Catholics as well. And they didn't really feel comfortable with modern technology and industrial society. So answering the deeper questions of the world through science wasn't working and traditional religion wasn't working. So you see in Germany and Austria, but also France and Britain and Russia, and no doubt Southeastern Europe, interest in occult, alternative religion, and what I call border science, Grenzwissenschaft from the German. The reason it took a different path in Germany and Austria is because instead of it being a kind of private escape for spiritual kind of reflection or for kind of making sense of a complex world, it got operationalized before, but mostly after World War I. And two things I think are really important in distinguishing Germany and Austria from Western Europe. One, there were racial elements that were in other occult movements and other pagan religion movements, but they were much stronger in the German and Austrian case. So if you take, for example, Theosophy, which was popular in New York, London, and Vienna, in New York and London, they talked about root races and kind of a Darwinistic idea that there were 7 different war races. But it was kind of background for the spirituality. They didn't really care that much about it. It was more about bringing Eastern religion into kind of a Western context. But then if you look at Austria and Germany, you have anthroposophy and Ariosophy, which is explicitly Aryan, and all about creating the original Aryan race, which was once, super powerful and dominated maybe an ancient civilization like Atlantis, and bringing it back. So this racial element, instead of being secondary like it was in American or British occultism or French occultism, became primary. Race and space, resuscitating an Indo-Aryan empire, was also part of it. The second distinction I would make is epistemologically, like how you approach the world. For the British, French, and American occultists, it was something you did outside of politics. So you don't have the Tories or the Labor Party or the American Democrats and Republicans coming up with foreign policy or talking about eugenics because they've read about Thor and Odin or world ice theory. But in Germany and Austria in the 20s, you have this stuff weaponized in politics. So you have politicians, often fascist politicians, who will draw on folklore, mythology, or border science, or occult ideas in talking about the kind of weapons they want to make, or what they want to do with Jews and Slavs, or what territory in the East should belong to Germans, because if you read werewolf and ghost stories, it used to be German. So it became politicized in a way that you don't see, that you don't have people in Britain talking about, vampire stories in the context of this allows us to conquer Eastern Europe. It just doesn't happen. So the same ideas are all over, but these two big differences are the racial aspects you see in the Austrian and German late 19th century, early 20th century supernatural imaginary, and the socio-political aspects that I think are stronger.
Na koji način se sama nacistička stranka povezivala i napajala sa tom mističnom inspiracijom? Vrlo često se spominje društvo Thule, ali zapravo je ono samo jedno od velike mreže različitih časopisa, okultista, astrologa. Dakle, kako je baš u samu nacističku stranku i kroz koje kanale i kroz koje ljude ušao taj način shvaćanja svijeta koji je na neki način bio toliko drastično drugačiji i toliko prožet nekakvim magijskim idejama o svijetu?
It's a very good question. The first thing, though, I would point out is Germans and Austrians aren't absolutely different. That is, probably 2/3 of society doesn't find these ideas terribly attractive. Remember, the Nazis only get about 1/3 of the votes. So if you're a socialist, if you're a worker, as I argue in the book, you're following Marxist ideas, materialism, you don't find occult ideas and speeches in graveyards about fallen comrades, who are part of the blood and soil community. That doesn't work for you. Nor do liberal thinkers, Einstein and Freud are not saying, oh yeah, this makes perfect sense. So it's a particular demographic of kind of lower middle class, somewhat educated people who are looking for answers. The same kind of people who make up the constituencies of the Nazi Party. So we're not talking about all Germans and Austrians, we're talking about a particular demographic. The alt-right or white nationalist groups of today would be a similar thing. And not everyone in Belgium or France are white nationalists or alt-right, but they get 30 or 40% of the vote. They live in rural areas and small towns. So I want to make it clear that I'm not saying all Germans and Austrians accepted these crazy ideas, but the ones who did, whatever you want to call them, did so before the Third Reich. So that there's a lot of Germans and Austrians who already find border science, occultism, and pagan or alternative religion interesting. And one of those groups, for example, the German Order, which is around in World War I, I'm sorry. The German Order is this kind of occult society formed by one of Germany's most famous anti-Semites. He was one of these people who thought if you just got rid of the Jews, everything would be great. And it's not very popular. It's too expensive to join it. You have to show that you're pure Aryan going back like 8 generations, which is expensive. It's very bourgeois, and it starts to fail during World War I because people have other concerns. So they try to refound this group in Munich, for example, and the guy who's in charge of the German Order there decides to meet up with this other guy who's got a group called the Thule Society, the Thule Gesellschaft, in 1918. And they refound the German Order, this occult society that's racist and anti-Semitic, and they play around with astrology and pendulum dowsing. And when the war ends and they've lost, it becomes very radicalized. And a lot of the people who come to the Thule Society meetings are future Nazis. Hans Frank, Rudolf Hess, Alfred Rosenberg. They're not all members of the Thule Society, but they meet up with Sabattendorf and these other Karl Harrer, and they discuss the problems of Weimar Germany. And while they're doing this, they all start to, again say, why can't we get workers and normal people? Why is it just these kind of bourgeois occultists, as Hitler called them, folkish thinkers clothed in bearskins? Like, he was kind of saying, we can't just have occultists in our group. How do we get normal workers? So they created something called the German Workers' Circle, which was supposed to go, Anton Drexler, the co-founder of the Nazi Party, goes to the railroad, basically the rail stations, and tries to recruit workers to join their worker circle. So they're not just these bourgeois elites that meet in the Four Seasons Hotel. And eventually him and Karl Harrer say, why don't we just make this a separate party? We'll call it the German Workers' Party instead of German Workers' Circle, and it won't be directly connected to the Thule Society, this occult group. It'll be its own political party. And a few months later, Hitler joins this party. So you can see there's this direct connection between this late 19th century occult, Ariosophic, paganist milieu, where people ran around in Grail castles and worshipped swastikas and talked about frost giants. There is this link to the early Nazi party. But if, as we go further into the 20s, Hitler wasn't terribly comfortable, and neither was Goebbels, with these occult roots. They saw it as impractical. They didn't reject the kind of thinking overall, or they would have kicked out Himmler and Hess and all these other supernatural thinkers. They just said, as Goebbels said in a speech in 1928, I understand you're all very agitated about which homeopathic and natural healing methods and which herbs work best, for whatever ancient practices or which runes, you got to read. That's all fascinating, but we've got to get votes. And if the folkish movement, if this racialist movement which he admitted, they're part of this folkish tradition, which is very mystical and esoteric, racist, blood and soil. If we want to get votes like the socialists and the liberals and the Catholics do, we've got to be more modern, and we have to be better at articulating what people want and not get bogged down in all these weird discussions. So Hitler and Goebbels wanted to move away from some of these ideas a little bit, but they never completely rejected them. And so I argue that the Nazis were a more sophisticated mass political version of this pre-war folkish milieu, if that makes sense.
Usprkos tome što je Treći Reich izrastao iz tog okultnog podzemlja, pa ga potom pokušavao i djelomično nekim aspektima i malo zabraniti, ponekad stvarno, ponekad lažno, nekakva činjenica jest da je usprkos tim političkim stremljenjima postojalo istinsko uvjerenje kod nacističkih vođa da se tu nešto zbiva. I konkretno Jung, poznati psihoanalitičar, je recimo Hitlera opisao kao ako postoje dva tipa vođe, poglavica i šaman, onda bi Hitler bio šaman jer je on bio kao glasnogovornik drevnih bogova. I rekao je da su se ljudi u blizini Hitlera osjećali kao pod nekom magičnom moći, kao pod hipnozom. Opisao ga je kao doslovce, evo njegovim riječima, vidovnjak koji padne u trans kad se nađe oči u oči s publikom. Prorok u stanju narcisudne uvjerenosti. Njegova moć nije bila politika nego magija. Znači u kojoj mjeri je samo mistično podzemlje oblikovalo samo Hitlerovu figuru bez obzira na politička stremljenja unutar društva?
Right. So this is a very complicated question because the Nazis all disagree over a lot of details. They generally embrace supernatural thinking more so than other middle-class parties. If you compare them to the liberals or the conservative Protestant parties, they're clearly more open to this. But they also argue amongst themselves. And I guess the best way to describe it in a contemporary context, if remember the American President George Bush a number of years ago said, well, why can't we teach religion in school alongside science? Then they get both sides. Well, religion isn't a side. Science is based in reality and religion is based on faith, and there's a million of them. So how do you do both sides? That's kind of how the Nazis would deal with this. They say, of course, science is really important and there are rational things we know about, but let's also be open to the occult, the soul, the blood and soil mysticism. And that, of course, means myriad things to different people. So different Nazi leaders would read different books or have different ideas. So Hitler apparently read this book, Magic, by Ernst Schertl, who was a parapsychologist, and who made arguments about how, before Christianity, shamans could manipulate people by tapping into magical kind of energies that charismatic leaders, what we would call wizards or shamans, are able to control. And it doesn't matter that Hitler believed that actually existed, because he saw it as a series of gestures or practices that you could use for people who are susceptible, right? Especially in mass settings. There were a lot of psychologists in the 1890s to the 20s who pointed out that, psychology of crowds, that you can manipulate people in crowds more easily than individuals. So I'm not positive that Hitler embraced all of these different ideas. He clearly grew up with the idea that science alone, empiricism, making rational arguments isn't going to win elections. In his mind, you had to appeal to people's emotion, their irrationality, their desire for something greater that speaks to their soul. And so that's what he was always looking for. And that's what he tapped into. And people perceived him that way, whether it's Jung or Strasser, one of his own party members. They all said, listening to him, it was like listening to a shaman or someone who was possessed by a demon, which is interesting because this Schertl guy wrote about how everyone has an inner demon that they can, demon in a kind of neutral sense, as some kind of magical pagan force, not as like the devil. Demonic powers allowed you to manipulate others. So I don't know that he believed it, but we know that he found it interesting as a way of manipulating people.
Na koji način se Treći Reich i u kojim vidovima koristio astrologijom? S obzirom da se ta praksa može pratiti i 30. godina kroz razne astrologe koji su primjerice predviđali pobjede ovog ili onog najčešće nacističkog nekakvog vođe u nekom slučaju. Potom se koristilo zapravo predviđanje politike. U Drugom svjetskom ratu su oformljene jedinice koje su pokušavale podmornice naći tako. Pa postoji priča da je Benito Mussolini, koji je 1943. bio zarobljen, opet nađen pomoću viska. Dakle, ta domena astrologije i viska koja je postala nekako dosta ozbiljno operacionalizirana u Trećem Reichu. Što se sve njome radilo ili pokušavalo raditi?
So one of the three areas I focus on, there's the occultism and there's the alternative religion, and then this question speaks to the border science, Grenzwissenschaft. So sciences that aren't really accepted as real science, but that the Nazis thought could be operationalized. So the most prominent examples I found were the use of pendulum dowsing, which happens twice. Once the Navy adopts radiesthesia, radiesthesia is a scientific name for pendulum dowsing. Divining is another way of putting it. To find supposedly British destroyers and British ships in the Atlantic, because they think, this is what's fascinating, this guy in one of these Navy officers says, well, the British are starting to find our ships, which is because the British had developed radar and sonar. So they had radio waves and sound waves that would reflect back. It was science. They didn't quite understand what was going on. So to show you how popular the supernatural imaginary and supernatural thinking is, a Navy officer, a guy named Hans Roeder, says, they must be using dowsing. And the Navy doesn't say, you're crazy, you're now decommissioned, go to an insane asylum. They say, okay, set up your own pendulum institute, maybe it'll work. So he sets up a pendulum institute and takes all these astrologers and pendulum dowsers and puts them in a room and has them, using their pendulums, hanging them over maps to try to find British ships. Of course, it doesn't work. Well, you would then think, okay, they're done with this. Maybe they'll throw them in concentration camps. Year later, Mussolini is captured. And so Himmler says, well, it's going to be really hard to find him. He's on one of those small islands, probably in the Mediterranean. I have an idea. Why don't we get a bunch of astrologers and pendulum dowsers and feed them and wine and dine them and convince them to help us find Mussolini? So some of these people were in concentration camps. They take them out. They put them in a beautiful villa in Wannsee, the suburbs of Berlin. They say, we can't operate if we're not treated well because, our minds don't work properly. We need lots of food and drink and cigars. And so Schellenberg, who's the head of the security service, actually complains how expensive this is. But Himmler's like, do it. It's worth it. And they spend like a month, with Wilhelm Wolff, who is Himmler's personal astrologer, tells a story that they're sitting there, doing all this. And Wolff's like, we found Mussolini. I can guarantee it. There's no evidence they found Mussolini. It may have been conventional intelligence that found Mussolini, but something that's interesting is one of the mid-level SS men, a guy named Wilhelm Hüttel, who wrote his memoirs after the war, initially claimed he thinks it worked. Later on he said, no, it wasn't occultism, it was conventional intelligence. But we said it was because Himmler wanted to believe it, so we let him think it worked. I don't know for sure if he believed it. Schellenberg himself said, I don't know, maybe it worked. But, these are two very famous cases of them operationalizing border science. No evidence that it worked. Goebbels, we could go on. Goebbels hired astrologers who were experts on Nostradamus. Now you'd say, Nostradamus, it's just all made up anyway, right? There's nothing real about astrology, so why didn't he just get some comic book writers to just write some stuff? But no, Goebbels wanted to do scientific astrology, so he hired professional astrologers, put them in a room, and said, I want you to work with my propaganda ministry to come up with really good interpretations of Nostradamus quatrains for counterintelligence and propaganda. So first he had propagandists writing, but he said, no, I need real astrologers. And then they started disagreeing. So they said, well, we're not really comfortable saying that, that thing about Arminius is Hitler taking over Western Europe and Belgium and the and Norway. We're not sure of that. And Goebbels would get frustrated and say, well, just say that. And so then one of them left and says, I'm not doing this anymore. So he had to get another pro-Nazi astrologer. But the idea that they're hiring real astrologers and not just making it up as they go along shows you again that even Goebbels, who was one of the more skeptical of the Nazis, remember he had complained in the 1920s about the folkish wandering scholars, even he somehow wants to get it right and use really good astrologers. So those are just a few examples of the way this filters into actual politics and decision making.
Zanimljivo što je unutar nacističke ideologije vrlo važna bila jedna, reklo bi se, ideja ili teza o povijesti koju su zvali ledena kozmogonija. Na koji način uopće neka ideja o dalekoj prošlosti, nekakvim zaleđenjima, kakva god ta ideja bila, je mogla imati veze i što je ona govorila nacistima, kuda bi se zapravo u tom smjeru trebalo krenuti?
Right. So, world ice theory or glacial cosmogony, there are kind of 3 points I'd make in response to that question. One, again, most mainstream German and Austrian scientists rejected it. One famous geologist already before World War I said, this world ice theory is like a fairy tale. You could replace the word ice with olive oil everywhere that the world ice theorists talk about their theory and just put world olive oil theory, and it would be no more or less true.
And what is the idea?
The idea is that there's giant blocks of ice floating around and that everything in Earth's history, geology, our solar system could be explained by these giant blocks of ice colliding into each other or melting or hitting other planets. It came out of a dream. This Austrian amateur scientist named Horbiger had a dream, woke up, wrote it down. Since he didn't really understand physics, he got a friend who was an astronomer named Philip Fout, who also wasn't really a professional academic, but he was a decent astronomer, and they wrote a book together in 1912 called Glacial Cosmogony, and it became very popular after World War I. This is to get to the second part. So it wasn't popular among mainstream scientists, but people who knew a little science, so like a lawyer who took a few physics classes or an engineer, especially if you were a racist and didn't like Jewish physics, you would read about this ice theory, which was authentically Austro-German. It talked about, ice ages when there were frost giants, and, it explained the flood, which a lot of racist thinkers tied to Atlantis or the Thule. So this ancient Icelandic civilization of pure Aryans. Now you could understand why it collapsed, because the ice melted or ice moons hit the Earth. So it helped explain a lot of things in the mythology that right-wing thinkers already shared in a way that sounded scientific. So it's already popular among a lot of these fringe movements, fringe thinkers. There are radio shows that Horbiger would do. Mainstream scientists make fun of him. But of course, people like Himmler find this stuff fascinating. Himmler becomes the second most powerful Nazi. He sets up a meteorological institute devoted to world ice theory to show you his attitude towards science. When even some world ice theorists start to debate things, which of course happens in science, right? There are different phenomena they're observing. He says, no, there's only one way to interpret things. It's the way Horbiger initially did it. And if you're not going to do it that way, you're not getting any funding. And then Hitler starts reading about this and says, this is fascinating. And he gives an honorary PhD, a doctorate, to the guy who wrote the book, who wasn't a real scientist. He gives it to him. So it's like now he's a real scientist. So for many Nazis, I think the reason this is the The second reason it's important is it's a way of squaring the circle. It's a scientific, seemingly scientific way to explain a lot of the mythology and racial theories and Indo-Aryan religious theories that many of these people already shared. It gives them kind of scientific cover for that. The third reason it's important is, as I try to argue throughout the book, everyone's obsessed with occultism, right? Occultism is actually a pretty narrow set of ideas. You know, witchcraft, demons, devils, astrology, right? Clairvoyance, maybe. World ice theory really has nothing to do with occultism per se. It's this new idea that pops up in the 1890s. It really is a border science. That's not a real science, but something that people claim as science. And I'm trying to show through world ice theory that it's not just occult ideas that were around since Paracelsus that get resuscitated. It's these new theories that mix with the occultism, these border sciences, and then the odd religious and mythological and folklore ideas. They all come together often in the same circles, even though they come from independent roots, because they're all searching for a faith-based view of the world. And world ice theory is this perfect example of something that claims to be a science that isn't a science, but works. It works. I mean, Himmler and Hitler thought it was great. And it came from someone's dream.
Treći Reich je imao veliku sklonost prema okultnom, ali ne samo teoretski i politički i smišljajući nove ideje, već i kroz, to je rezultiralo i stvarnim arheološkim ekspedicijama. Ekspedicije su išle na Island, u paleotska nalazišta u Europi, u Tibet, u Italiju, u Grčku. Pa koja bi bila priča generalno oko tih arheoloških ekspedicija? Što su oni tražili na Tibetu, Italiji, Grčkoj? Koji je bio zapravo zajednički nekakav nazivnik? Jer imali su oni svog Indianu Jonesa, on se zvao Otto Rahn, koji je napisao knjigu Luciferov sud i potraga za gralom. To su manje poznati podaci koje, eto, Otto Rahnu su ljudi čuli, ali eto u vašoj knjizi se može pročitati čime se on točno bavio. Pa cijela ta priča od Svetog grala do Tibeta, od Islanda do Italije, Grčke i paleolitika, što su to njemački arheolozi zapravo tražili?
Let's start with the Holy Grail. So, because it's kind of at the center of all these archaeological and folkloric expeditions that you mentioned, to Tibet, to Iceland, to southern France, right, where the Cathars were. For many occult thinkers or pagan religious thinkers, or even alternative Christian thinkers, the Holy Grail represented a kind of key to understanding authentic European religion, whether Christian or pagan. For the Nazis, they were drawing on these traditions of root races and Indo-Aryan civilizations that were, you know, created by racially pure Aryans thousands of years before recorded history. And then whether it was in Atlantis or the Thule, this great Atlantean civilization collapsed, the world flooded, and the Aryans, you know, that didn't intermarry with weaker races, fled to the highest point they could get to, which for these race theorists included Tibet, right, because it's so high. And then when the floods receded, they intermingled with locals and created new civilizations. So Persia, India, the Hindu civilization, Japan. So the theories that filtered through the 19th century into racist thinkers of the 20th century and then the Nazis is, you've got these Indo-Aryan civilizations that go back to this Ur-Aryan civilization, and there must be some commonalities among all of them that are ancient, that need to be recovered. Not just racially, creating some pure supermen again out of all these splintered Aryan groups, but religion and spirituality. So researching the Grail for them, the theory was, the reason they hired people like Otto Rahn, the real Indiana Jones, is to find out what the Grail symbolized across all these Indo-Aryan civilizations and figure out what the common religion and spirituality was, and maybe through that, the history of the Aryan people. So Rahn went to Montsegur, where the Cathars, the heretical sect, they were a Christian sect, but they were wiped out by the Inquisition, went to where the Cathars were in southern France, in this cave in the mountain of Montsegur, to find the Holy Grail or just artifacts related to it. They weren't sure there was an actual Grail, but they knew there was some kind of Ur-Aryan religion or pagan religion that was shared by all these Aryan groups that they wanted to recover. And so they researched the Grail, and Rahn's theory is that the religion around the Grail was a pagan Germanic religion, Aryan religion, that had initially been there like 10,000 years ago, filtered back east to Tibet. Tibetan priests practiced it. It was based on all sorts of kind of Indo-Aryan mystical theories. And then it filtered through Persia back west in the kind of Roman period. And then the Christians tried to wipe it out because it was pagan and Indo-Aryan. And according to Himmler and Dare and Rosenberg, a lot of Nazi leaders, the Christians weren't doing it just because it wasn't Christian. For them, the Catholic Church was run by the Jews. The Jews ran the Catholic Church. The Jews wanted to exterminate Aryan culture and religion, which they resented. And so Christianity, on the one hand, was a way of making everyone Jewish because it really came out of Jewish religion. So they said, you know, Jesus didn't ever want Paul to spread it the way that he did because Paul was a Jew. Jesus was probably some Aryan, lost Aryan, blonde, blue-eyed guy who was maybe Balder from the Nordic mythology. And Christianity perverted Jesus' teachings and is now the way the Jews try to control you and destroy Aryan religion and culture. So the Grail becomes symbolic of resuscitating that Aryan culture. And the reason the Catholic Church wanted to wipe out people who believed in the Grail, like the Cathars or the Templars, is they wanted to destroy German culture. And so they say witches aren't really witches. They're Germanic priestesses who practice this Grail religion, this Indo-Aryan religion. And the Catholic Church, run by the Jews, wants to destroy that religion. And if you kill all the women, they can't have children. So they were basically practicing genocide, the Catholic Church, against the Indo-Aryan religion. And if you can recover the religion of the Grail, you can recover the religion and the runes and the symbols of ancient Aryan cultures everywhere, which is why they respected Hinduism and Shinto and to some degree Islam, which they thought was linked to this Aryan religion. And it also, what's so fascinating about these expeditions and the research they did on witches is some of the SS said, well, since the Jews are trying to exterminate us through the church in the past, they're probably going to still try to exterminate us now. We have to be ready to fight them with their own methods. So it becomes a justification for the Holocaust in some ways. Their belief that the Inquisition was an attempt to wipe out witches who were German, in some ways feeds into their conspiratorial view about Jews that helps them justify wiping out Jews in the present. So I just summarized, multiple chapters in a few minutes, but that's how it all ties together.
Na koji način je taj mistični ili magijski omotač, kako su ga vidjeli ljudi u Trećem Reichu, pogotovo nacisti sami, a također i onaj dio ljudi koji se tako pripadao tim folkiš pokretima, kako je on doveo u stvari do eugenike i što se točno koristilo i radilo na raznim logorašima, zarobljenicima? Koje su to bile ideje, znanstvene ideje na način Trećeg Reicha, kojima se pokušavalo primjerice ustanoviti mogu li se ljudi oživjeti i takve stvari. Pa kako je nadnaravna ta ideja u Trećem Reichu dovela do eugenike i do nekih od tih doista, kako bi se reklo, bizarnih znanstvenih pokusa?
So if we come back to the bigger picture of the book, let me start there. My argument is that traditional religion, while it can lead to religious wars and everything, is in some ways something people recognize as a religion. It's faith, right? You can convert someone, but you're not going to practice science based on what you read in the Bible or the Quran. Most people understand that. Same thing with regular mainstream science. There are practices, experiments that have to be conducted, methods that have to be followed. You gradually produce research. Everyone peer reviews it all over the world, Japan, Germany, America, and then you might operationalize it. What made the Nazis dangerous is they did what most occultists do. They combined both. So they took remember, not a single leading Nazi has a PhD in science. Himmler, Hitler, Goebbels is a poet, right? These are not people trained in science, but they read popular science. Like most occultists or conspiracy theorists now, they read enough to say, this Darwin guy sounds great, and biology and evolution, that fits into my idea of the world, that there are better races and worse races. But they're also reading the mythology and the folklore and the vampire and werewolf stories. And my argument is they mix both together. So they're frustrated by scientists, including German scientists, who say, that doesn't make any sense. We don't want to conduct these experiments, or we can't prove that Jews are completely different than Germans. So they ignore them, and they find scientists or just other Nazis who say, oh yeah, the Jews are the worst possible race because they're a mix of the Asiatic and all this stuff that can't be proven genetically, right? And that allows them to say, well, since they have, these tendencies, they're almost like vampires with superhuman powers, and they want to suck the blood out of our society, they can then operationalize that in a way that sounds scientific. Well, we've got to get rid of the Jewish virus. But really, they're motivated by religious kind of thinking. Same thing happens with these human experiments. They find people like Zygmunt Rascher, whose father was literally a leader, Hans Rascher, of the anthroposophist movement, this occult philosophy of Rudolf Steiner that believed in, astrology and biodynamic agriculture and all this bizarre stuff. His son, predictably, is fascinated by Tibet and odd racial theories. He goes to Tibet with Himmler's Tibet expedition, and then he's perfectly willing to conduct weird experiments with human beings, tying twins together, freezing them to death and resuscitating them, because he's not a conventional scientist, right? He's got that faith-based aspect to it, which is why he's collecting skulls in Tibet. One of the other, Bickel, I think's his name, one of the other Nazi scientists or doctors, is got weird ideas about Jewish skeletons, and Himmler and him are talking about, are the Central Asian Jews really Aryans, or are they Jews? And they're conducting these weird, like they're measuring their skulls and all this stuff. This is not something by the 30s that most German and Austrian anthropologists who were mainstream anthropologists, or certainly Franz Boas or anyone believes in anymore. But they can get away with it because they're mixing science and the supernatural, right? They're mixing faith and Darwin. And that's what makes them dangerous, because they're able to square any circle that way. And that's what I talk about, is how they draw on these supernatural ideas like folklore and mythology and Indo-Aryan civilization theory to justify allying with the Japanese and helping the Indians out against the British, who clearly ethnically are from a very different background than Germans. And then Jews who are blonde and blue-eyed are still evil vampires that need to be murdered. That's not science. There's no Darwinian or genetic study you could do that would say that Ashkenazi Jews are 100% demons and the Japanese are Aryans, unless you're a Nazi, because you're reading all this weird mythology and they don't really care. Gypsies, right? The Roman Sinti. Himmler says, the really pure Roma, don't kill them. I want to study them, because my theory is, because there's a lot of Indo-Aryan, is that they're true Aryans that go back thousands of years. So the mixed race Roma, think about this bizarre logic, that mixed with Germans, they're impure and we can wipe them out. But keep about 20,000 of the pure race Roma around. We need to study their practices. Maybe they're Ur-Aryans. Makes no sense based on anthropology, biology, but for many Nazis it made sense. And so it's that mix of faith and science that makes them dangerous.
Takav mistični pristup je stvorio i jako veliku mitologiju oko raznih nacističkih tajnih oružja. I činjenica jest da su mnogi potpuno bizarni, neobični zrakoplovi, rakete i razne druge letjelice se pokušavale graditi, naravno paralelno i sa najvećim tehnološkim dostignućima kao što je prvi mlazni motor, prve rakete i slično. Pa pozabavimo se ovim takozvanim čudotvornim oružjima i u stvari onim neobičnim, egzotičnim tehnologijama koje su zvale Kugelblitz, Feuerball, Die Glock ili zvono, repulzina, odnosno repulzina Viktora Schaubergera. Koliko su uopće kod tih tehnologija, koliko su uopće išta događalo. Drugim riječima, ako su i bile neuspješne, je li se nešto događalo da je nešto poletjelo, da je na neki način barem bilo u nekoj fazi da se nešto zbiva, ili jednostavno su ovi mainstream istraživači koji su napravili mlazni motor za Messerschmitt 262 bili oni koji su polučili rezultate, a ovi koji su se bavili ovako malo mističnim tehnologijama nisu.
So let me start with a response to this, a nod to critical theory and to Adorno and Horkheimer, right? There is plenty of evidence that even the most scientific people are sometimes motivated by imagination and fantasy, right? So that can contribute to great scientific ideas. Miraculous, sometimes technology itself is miraculous. So I don't want to dismiss all of the fantastical thinking that went on in the Third Reich as coming out of this bizarre supernatural imaginary. Some of it is that even brilliant thinkers sometimes get ambitious and have fantastical ideas that inspire them, if that makes sense. That being said, there was a tension between what I would argue mainstream German scientific culture, which was the leading scientific culture in the world in the 20s and 30s. It gets undermined by the Nazis. And then this more faith-based, supernatural-infused science fiction culture that characterizes Himmler and Hitler's ideas, right? Or the science fiction stuff, or Rudolf Hess with his Homeopathic Institute. So they're competing. And because ideology matters, there are lots of cases where money goes to the wrong places. So yes, jet engines and rocket technology, brilliant. Of course, those are the kinds of tangible things that semi-educated people who read comic books and watch, Flash Gordon cartoons like, because you can see it, you can watch it. Like in America, you have a lot of people who are very religious, evangelical Christians, who go to NASA and watch the rockets, but they don't really believe in other aspects of science, like evolution or nuclear physics that you can't see and touch and feel. So there were a lot of Nazis who liked rockets and jet engines and tanks, but when it came to more complicated stuff, like nuclear energy, they didn't quite trust it. And they didn't trust specialists and experts. Hitler always complaining about these experts who think they know everything. But I never got a PhD, and look how brilliant I am. I'm running the SS, and I'm running, Hitler's like, I came from nothing. I was a house painter. So that caused a lot of problems because they would decide they didn't find something interesting, and they would take money away from it. Like building more fighters that they needed to fend off all the bombers because they wanted to put the money into some fancy new rocket that they thought would win the war, a miracle weapon, a Wunderwaffen. So my argument it's that their technology was very impressive and most of the alternative things you mentioned didn't work. So it was almost always a failure. It was almost always a bad idea to experiment with. We don't even know for sure, by the way, if they experiment with anti-gravity, this Kugelblitz and the repulsine. There's some evidence that Victor Schauberger and some other alternative scientists were conducting odd kind of weapons technology experiments. Some people died of radiation, usually concentration camp inmates. I've found no evidence they actually operationalized anything. That's, as far as I'm concerned, that's a post-war mythology. That the same kind of occult and conspiracy thinkers who are fascinated by it then promote because they like these ideas. It almost always failed. And Speer, who I quote repeatedly in the book, Albert Speer, he's the armaments minister. And he's telling everyone, we have no miracle weapons. It's late 44, we're going to either win conventionally or we're going to lose. It's not going to be because I come up with some rocket that blows up millions of people. If anyone's going to do that, it's the Americans who are working on the atomic weapon. And yet you've got Baldur von Schirach and Goebbels and Bormann, all these people coming to him all the time, say, when is the next miracle weapon coming? He says, well, I don't have one. And the fact that they keep believing in it shows you again how there's a faith-based element to the way many Nazis operate. Not the Air Force necessarily, though they're complicit in some of those nasty experiments. Not necessarily the army leaders. The Navy, of course, we talked about the pendulum dowsing, but they're a little more insulated from this kind of bizarre world. But the Nazis themselves are immersed in it. And so that creates tensions. And to give one last example, this guy, Hans Kammler, who was an architect, who built basically the gas chambers at Auschwitz. That's what he was good at, is murdering people. After the attempt on Hitler's life, which is mostly military men who think he's gone nuts and they're going to lose, right, in July of 44, Hitler decides he doesn't trust the military anymore. And Himmler, who's very smart, goes to Hitler and says, you know what, you're right, you shouldn't trust them. Instead of having Walter Dornberger and Werner von Braun and all these experts running everything, why don't you put this SS guy, Kammler, in charge of our rocket program? And Speer, you know, I'll work with him, but he's not in the SS, so we don't need him either. And so at the decisive moment of the war, because Hitler no longer trusts the military, that's one of the reasons, Himmler and the SS get to take over all this technology. So you've got a guy like Himmler who's sending pendulum dowsers along with the Waffen-SS to find gold and water under the ground, who's trying to experiment with death rays, which even Hitler thinks is silly. And now he's in charge of the rocket program. No wonder things didn't develop, right? I mean, if you see these tensions between the two cultures, it really undermined the war effort, I would argue.
U jednoj fazi rata općinjenost mitologijom i misticizmom skoro je poprimala stvarne oblike. Konkretno, vukodlaci su postali jako popularni kao nekakvi njemački zaštitnici, dok su Slaveni bili vampiri. Zanimljivo je također da u knjizi bilježite i mnogobrojna svjedočanstva gdje su ti njemački vojnici doista viđali kako su oni vidjeli partizane, možda je to bio neki PTSD ili nešto, ali koji su se kao transformirali u vampire, padali i slično. To nas naravno dovodi u 19. stoljeće dok je Austro-Ugarska u Srbiji općenito vodila nekakve kampanje protiv vampira. No, na koji način su se na kraju rata zaratili, znači, vukodlaci i vampiri s jedne strane? I koliko uopće istine može biti u tim stvarima u kojima su mnogi vojnici koji su se suočavali s partizanima doista pričali da su vidjeli nekakve transformacije na ljudima koji su bile zastrašujuće, mada moram reći iz opisa pomalo izgleda kao da su se ljudi rušili od padavice ili slično. Kakva je to bila bitka između vukodlaka i vampira koja se događala u toj njemačkoj mašti kada su se formirale te zadnje jedinice i zapravo zadnji napori u ratu?
Let's start again, just to remind the listeners or the viewers that the argument of the book is that one reason that German and Austrian people get triggered into believing a lot of these things or searching for new solutions or new ideas is because of trauma. So it's the experience of modern rapid industrialization. You got to remember, Germany modernized very quickly, very, very widely in the late 19th century, Germany and Austria. So part of the reason they embrace a lot of these supernatural ideas is as a response to trying to understand that world. That's already traumatizing. Then you have World War I, which impacts Germany and Austria far worse even than other countries. I mean, the death, disease, collapse of everything. And so a search for meaning after that. And then World War II, I mean, other than the East, which is even worse, right? The Germans bore the brunt of this. So what you see happening is a series of traumas, which I think makes people, I mean, you don't have to be Freudian, susceptible to kind of odd rationalizations and maybe irrational explanations of the world. So by the end of World War II, what you're calling post-traumatic stress or trauma gets kind of deployed in these mythological, supernatural ways. I don't think it's unique to Germans and Austrians, but I think they're drawing on a reservoir of ideas that now go back decades, like the idea that werewolves are a kind of Ur-Germanic noble monster, like Odin's own fighters or the Nordic berserkers who would put on animal skins and defend their country and their race and their blood, right? Against these evil, degenerate Eastern Jewish and Slavic vampires who want to suck the blood out of the Aryan and molest blonde, blue-eyed women and corrupt them and corrupt your society. So that's already there in the supernatural imaginary. So then you combine that with war, and it's not surprising that Goebbels, Himmler, and Hitler are like, what are we going to call our partisan group? We need one, because it works so well for the Soviets, we need our own partisans. Oh, I don't know, we'll call them werewolves. And they not only call it werewolf, they take the H out. So in the 20s, there were already werewolf partisan movements that many of whom became absorbed in the Nazi party. They were these paramilitary that would run around but it was Wehr, W-E-H-R, which is a play on words because it also means defense, Wehrmacht, right? So there are werewolves who are also part of the military. When Himmler decides to resuscitate the idea of werewolf paramilitary, he takes the H out. So it's just Werwolf, W-E-R, which is, as in English, the supernatural way you would do it. So and then Goebbels creates a werewolf radio station with this woman who howls, and he says, in the dead of night, the werewolves are going to emerge from the forest and murder you. So they're clearly going for the supernatural. They think that's going to inspire German partisans to fight more viciously, as Hitler calls them, his wolves, right? And they think it's going to scare the German population from collaborating with the Allies when they come in. Meanwhile, ethnic Germans in the Banat, in this area which is now Serbia, I believe, so Serbo-Croatian area of Europe, where vampire myths were very powerful, right? A lot of the vampire stories that have been collected the last 300 years are from, former Yugoslavia. They're interpreting these attacks by partisans, by what they call Tito partisans, because they're all under Tito and they're now attacking Germans. They interpret it as them turning into vampires, blood drinkers. Clearly, they're not really vampires. What's interesting to me is that the way they're making sense of their world and the end of the war and all the violence, these ethnic Germans, is they're debriefed by an SS folklorist, by the way. Perfect, right? The guy who wants to collect all these stories, the reason I was able to read these documents, he's an SS folklorist who had gone east with the SS to decide which populations were Aryan and which weren't based on their folk tales, okay? This is a guy who says, yeah, I come talk to me. I want to hear about these vampire experiences. And they tell him that the Slavs were turning into blood drinkers. Whenever they would see a German or smell a German, they'd say, we need to drink Schwabenblut. Do I really think that they were vampires? Absolutely not. It's a post-traumatic stress response. But we have lots of post-traumatic stress in other parts of the world in World War II, and they're not saying they're becoming vampires. And we have lots of partisan groups across Europe. Why do the Germans call their partisan group werewolves? My argument is because these supernatural ideas were so, at least, well entrenched in the subconscious that they get drawn out in war. So that's kind of my explanation for it.
Za kraj možda bi bilo zanimljivo zapitati se je li postojao neki primjer koji bi bio sličan nacističkoj Njemačkoj po pitanju sprege sa tim okultnim i nadnaravnim idejama u poznatoj ljudskoj povijesti, ili je to jedinstven slučaj? Možda se fragmenti drugdje mogu i naći, možda i ne, no je li to jedinstvena bila praksa 33. do 45. u Njemačkoj ili postoje slični slučajevi i drugdje po svijetu?
Right, that's a great question. So why do these ideas become operationalized in the way they do in Germany and Austria, and do you see this anywhere else? So I have a few responses. I've thought about it. And I'm not a sociologist of religion. This book is a synthetic work. I'm drawing on lots of disciplines: sociology, religious studies, history, political science, right? But my observation would be most countries that are not split in terms of religion. So for example, the fascist parties in Italy and Spain and France could draw on Catholic tradition, right? They could ally with the Catholic Church in order to have a supernatural or faith-based reservoir of thinking, right? There were Italian fascist occultists like Julius Evola, but where did he go to do his research? He left Italy and went and worked with the SS, because the Italian fascists weren't as interested, in his mind, in these things. Germany was split in terms of religion, right? It was split between Catholic and Protestant. So there was no religion or church that the fascists could ally with. They needed to create something else. And so, if I'm just talking about religion now, but why does this particular kind of pagan, Nordic set of ideas work? Because in German-speaking world, where life was so splintered, and religion was so splintered, you have Calvinists and Lutherans and Catholics and secularists, they were trying to come up with something else that could hold together people in literally the fascist. I mean, fascism comes from this idea of Mussolini, the sheaf of wheat that throws all classes together and binds it. So they needed something that could do that. So I think Germany, among modern Western democracies, because the other thing that's important to point out is there's very few countries like Germany or the United States or Britain or France in world history. Modern industrialized societies that have pure, have modern democracies where everyone votes, women, man, everybody. There aren't many societies in world history until the 20th century that have that. And most of the ones that did exist were only in Western Europe. Poland didn't have a pure pluralist democracy in the 20s and 30s. It was a little authoritarian. Croatia, Hungary, they're similar, but the idea is that to have a mass political system that's so complicated, you then need to draw on something to tie people together if you're a white nationalist or you're alt-right. And so the reason you don't see it a lot of other places, but you're seeing it more now, is there just haven't been that many modern industrial societies facing the challenges that faced European industrialized societies in the 20s and 30s and are facing us again today. There's usually a traditional religion you can draw on. So the supernatural imaginary is a way of substituting for traditional religion. And it was unique to Germany and Austria at that time, what they drew on, but you're seeing it in America today. There's a lot of people who vote for the right-wing parties. Some of them are evangelical Christians. Some of them believe in Area 51. Some of them think there's a conspiracy of Muslims trying to destroy the world and Western culture. Some of them think that there's, caravans of Hispanic people who are about to flood in and destroy our race. They don't have the same views. They're just all caught up in this supernatural imaginary of not looking at the world realistically, not looking at statistics that immigrants actually commit fewer crimes. So I don't think you're going to find the same mix that you find in Germany and Austria than anywhere else, because it's always unique to that time, place, and country. What you will find is there's always a reservoir of supernatural or conspiratorial thinking that is part of the tradition of every country. And if it ever gets operationalized in politics and society and science, it's dangerous. So yes, other societies are prone, as Jung says in 1945, because America needs to look out because it's not gone through all the crises the Germans have gone through. If the Americans, with their faith-based traditions and their pride and their nationalism, went through what the Germans just went through, he says their own demons will surface and they could be just as bad as we were. So, or he was Swiss, so he didn't really take any. But you know what I mean. So no, you won't find this exactly the same way elsewhere. But the same phenomena sociologically exist.
Gospodine Kurlander, hvala vam na ovom razgovoru i do neke sljedeće prilike. Doviđenja.
Doviđenja. Hvala.